Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Well, I've been looking forward to this interview. It's been a long time since I got to talk to Chuy García. He is the congressman from Illinois 4th Congressional District. He and I have known about each other a long time from our activist days. He was an alderman. He was real involved in helping Harold Washington be elected. He went on to become a state senator, a member of the Cook County Board of Commissioners, and he is the U.S. congressman from the 4th District. And he's a wonderful guy. Good afternoon to you, Chuy.
Thank you so much. Great to join you, Michael. It's been a while. Lots going on in Washington right now, but maybe it won't be much after all. But we'll see. But we are dealing with war and peace and immigration and migrant cities and things that we're experiencing back home that are causing plenty of tensions and challenges for the future, as you know.
Well, we're going to touch on, I guess, all of that stuff. Let's start in the Middle East. A lot of people were pretty shocked by the initial attack on the people of Israel. But I've been saying for weeks now that I think Israel is losing the high ground. We found this week that President Biden actually was critical of Israel, and it's clear there's some differences. A number of people have started to come out for a ceasefire. I believe Jan Schakowsky, a fellow congresswoman from Illinois, as well as Senator Dirksen. And I think you, too. Give us a little hit on what's going on in the Middle East and where you're at on a ceasefire.
Well, the Middle East and the situation between Israel and the Palestinians in the West Bank, and of course, the events of the last 2 months in Gaza, which are heart-wrenching and hard to see continue being in the news for all the bad reason. The situation remains very dire, very urgent. You saw the UN voted by a whopping number calling for a ceasefire. It's the only way forward. And funding for Israel to the level of over $10 billion is a part of this package, which is being debated. That also includes funding for Ukraine, Taiwan, and for the border is a part of this current debate and controversy here in Washington. So it was good, in my opinion, to see President Biden say last night that Israel has engaged in indiscriminate bombing. And obviously the implication is that thousands of lives are being lost. So many of them children, so many others civilians. And it just breaks your heart. I came out calling for, of course, condemning Hamas and calling for a ceasefire. The morning that I learned of this must have been perhaps early October 8th. And I did so just out of an instinct that the current Israeli government, led by Benjamin Netanyahu, is the most reactionary and right-wing government ever in Israel, and how they would respond. And I'm afraid to say that my instinct was right on point, because I think that the needless taking of so many lives does not have to happen, and it needs to stop. We're witnessing a disaster, of course, unfold on top of an existing humanitarian crisis. Gaza was already suffering from a 16-year blockade, with civilians living in conditions that many human rights groups have said is an open-air prison. So now the conditions are far, far worse. UN officials report that Gazan society is teetering on the edge of collapse. The health system, I think, is collapsed already. Doctors are desperate. Other medical personnel and humanitarian aid is sorely lacking. And let's not forget that it is estimated that 85% of the population has been displaced. There are longer term questions like, where will people return to if the bombing stops? Where are the jobs? Where are the apartment buildings? Where are the institutions and the businesses that were there? So I was one of the first members to call for a ceasefire before we knew what would unfold, before it sort of got politicized and polarized. And right now, there are more than 60 members of Congress who have called for a ceasefire. And I hope that that coalition grows. And I hope that President Biden will become one of them, though he's not in Congress. And, we saw the importance of diplomacy and de-escalation with the temporary ceasefire last month, which led to the release of many hostages, including Americans. Israelis deserve to live in safety, so do Palestinians. But there's no military solution to this horrifying situation, and bombs will not bring a durable peace.
Well, we'll probably have to talk about this more in the future because it seems to be going on. It seems like the Netanyahu government, the most conservative, as you point out, is really about destroying Gaza and the West Bank. It's going to be rough, and we'll follow up on that. Let me ask you, there's a lot of talk in Washington over the supplemental. So for those of us in the back room, please tell us what the supplemental actually is and what it's all about, what's going on with you guys over in Congress.
Yes. So a supplemental is a proposal. It turns into a bill specifically because that's the way we have to enact things in Congress to have the force of law. Right now, it is a proposal that President Biden has made to Congress to provide military assistance and humanitarian assistance to Ukraine, to Israel, to Taiwan, and for the border. It also provides for additional humanitarian assistance to those war zones across the globe, but including Gaza and the West Bank. So it is being debated in Congress. There's controversy because many Republicans want to end the support for Ukraine and think that enough has been done. There is a group of members of Congress who are Putin sympathizers and backers, and I guess they see him as Russia's Donald Trump. I don't know. But there is such a block that is saying we should not provide additional funding. There are Republicans who support aid to Ukraine, and of course, especially more Democrats supporting it. The proposal has been used by the Republican Party to say that it will not pass in the House and it will not pass in the Senate. And the Senate seems to be deferring to the House, at least Senate Republicans, if there aren't border security and other issues included in the bill. This is unusual. It's very rare that a supplemental funding bill is used to enact policy, and very radical policy, I must say, that would dismantle the asylum system, make it much more difficult for people to seek political asylum at the border, force them to apply in safe third countries. There are very few of those in the hemisphere right now, especially in Mexico and Central America or South America as well. And it would also end the President Biden's authority on parole, an authority that's been used to allow people fleeing persecution and violence and many other horrible things to be allowed into the country with parole under supervision, so that they can have an opportunity to make their case before immigration officials for asylum and refuge. And what is so striking about this is supplemental proposal and the subsequent negotiations is that Republicans in the Senate are sort of leading it, and the Democrats on there include Chris Murphy from Connecticut, but Kristen Sinema, who is not a Democrat anymore. I don't know what she is exactly, but maybe an independent, as she likes to call herself. But the point is this, that the most affected communities, immigrants and Latino communities, are not at the table. There's no consultation going on with the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, 42-member caucus. And our request to meet with the White House, with the president, or with his chief of staff has not been acknowledged. So we are being left out of this process and potentially could serve as the sacrificial lamb as this deal gets cooked up. So it's very troubling, and it got lumped together so that it would be difficult for Congress to reject either separately assistance to Ukraine, though if that came as one separate bill, it would pass. There would be more debate around Israel. And then, of course, there would be much debate about how much more funding we want to provide to militarize the border and to turn people away, essentially enacting Trump era policies that seek to shut the border down. And that would be very problematic for our country. It would be very problematic for Mexico, would be just unprecedented. And we know one thing, that when people are desperate, they will find a way to come here. So this will not have the effect of just shutting down the border and keeping people from entering into the country. Republicans have weaponized the immigration issue, created hysteria, tropes, and stereotypes, and they're seeking to take advantage of this situation as it relates to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan to force border policy, breaking longstanding traditions that you don't do that in a supplemental budget or funding bill.
Chuy Garcia, how big a hit do you think immigration and the border policy will take from say a progressive perspective, or a hope anyhow? And what ideally would you do to deal with the border situation if you had the ability to enact whatever?
Well, look, adopting the core tenets of Trump's immigration policy won't work.
Right.
And it's simply a political electoral calculation by Republicans, and it's a bad one. So I don't know why a Democratic administration would say, all right, maybe we'll give on what you want to do. It's short-sighted. I think it alienates a significant part of a base that elected the president to office in the first place, and shutting down legal pathways to immigration isn't going to stop people fleeing violence and hunger and other terrible things. Reducing the avenues of legal immigration is what has exploded. The number of people coming here, and also our foreign policy and the sanctions that we have put on Venezuela, Cuba, all of the drug wars and the military assistance that we provided Colombia for such a long time. We have driven people out of their countries. We have displaced them. And now our foreign policy is, at our southern border. And as we see, because of all of its implications in, making people look for a better way to live, they have come north, and they are in our cities, as we know.
And they're going to be voters in our cities in a not too far off future. Chuy, in our time remaining, let me ask you, let's bring it home to Chicago And I think that the people of Chicago have always welcomed people from other countries who left their countries in a desperate situation. Um, and then we started to see some pushback and kind of a not in my backyard. Um, and I think that there are plenty of people in Chicago who have good reason to be critical of them not getting things they were promised. But it also is a pretty dire situation for people coming to the border. We saw most recently in Brighton Park, a small number of people turning out probably 58,000 people in that ward. But they got a lot of press, and they were kind of saved when the governor came up with the environmental testing that showed that the site was really not ready to be occupied. So there was a little victory for those people, but and I kind of like that. But what I don't like is the not in my backyard. And then you have aldermen calling for ending the sanctuary cities, which will not affect it. Give us your take on Chicago and how best we might deal with the influx of migrants that are going to continue to come for a little bit of time.
Yeah, let's be clear about some things. This isn't anything new. Uh, it happened with the Chinese. The first anti-immigrant legislation in our country in 1882 was the Chinese Exclusion Act. So when I saw Chinese Americans kind of leading the charge against migrants coming to Brighton Park, that was disappointing. That was heartbreaking for this immigrant boy who came from Mexico. But look, it's been done to the Chinese, to the Irish, to Italians, to Mexicans. At least in two instances in the 20th century, during the Great Depression, when Mexican people of Mexican American origin, U.S. citizens, were repatriated to Mexico because of how they looked and their names and where they lived in the Southwest primarily. Again, during the 1950s, Operation Wetback and all of the implications of that trope and that stereotyping. And now, we're seeing it, a new iteration of these tensions with new immigrants. And we're also seeing misinformation that plays on people's fears. But at the core of that fear is pain and disillusionment with a system and government that has failed them in part. I understand some of the tensions that we've seen in the African American community, in other communities as well. I immigrated to Chicago in 1965, and I grew up, in progressive activism and believing in coalition. And it was, the black, brown, and the rest of the rainbow that shook up Chicago's political system and the status quo. And I was, elected to represent one of the city's first Latino majority wards with Harold Washington. And we fought for reinvestment in the neighborhoods. That was the primary piece in his platform and in priorities when he became mayor. So we made it happen. In 1985, Mayor Washington issued the first executive order declaring Chicago a welcoming sanctuary city because a Puerto Rican woman, a commissioner, Maria Cerda, was interrogated by immigration officials asking her for her papers. A woman, U.S. citizen, born in Puerto Rico, racially profiled, ethnically profiled, and asked for her papers, but it was a reflection of something else that was going on in immigrant communities. So all of these are the stories and the realities of why we have an executive order, why we have a policy now in Chicago, an ordinance that seeks to welcome everyone and to protect people. This is all to say that, all of my years of activism and years in office, all of that is rooted in the notion that the only way to move forward is through coalition and fighting for equity and fighting for racial and economic justice for everyone in our city and to reinvest. So that is, I think, the most important thing. My hope right now, I want you to know that we are fighting, first of all, in the supplemental on the immigration and immigrants front, that we want more resources for sanctuary cities like Chicago, New York, Houston, other cities, because it is having an impact on the city's budgets and it needs to be alleviated. But we're also fighting for funding for organizations that are welcoming and have used up parts of their budgets to do this as well. And we're also trying to include policy, since the president has said, let's consider some Republican policy in the supplemental. We're saying, let's do some legalization for dreamers, for people who have DACA across the country. Republican and Democratic voters support this overwhelmingly. These are young people, for the most part, who have grown up all of their lives in this country. It's the only place they know as home. Let's legalize them. Let's help people who are married to U.S. citizens get their green cards faster. Let's hire more immigration judges so that we can more expeditiously do away with the backlog in consideration of asylum seekers and other immigration-related applications as well. These are all very common sense things that our economy needs, that voters, for the most part, support overwhelmingly. And this can get our immigration system back on track as we do some longer term reforms to ensure that there is fairness in the system, that it addresses not just our economic needs, but also needs for the future. We need more people to care for our children, more people to care for our elderly, for people who are over 65, Michael. And of course, we need them in manufacturing. We need them in technology. We need them in all the sectors. So that should lead to a revision of our immigration laws and a modernization of our immigration laws.
Chuy Garcia, there's a lot of things I'd like to ask you about, but I know you're in the cauldron over there and you got to run off and do what you got to do, and we're rooting for you. I really
let's book another date so we can talk some more, and maybe over the holidays we'll have a chance to do that and see what comes out of the session that's supposed to end this week.
All right, I'll be back in touch with you, Chuy. Thanks.